5 countries where Americans are not welcome in 2024. Today, we're diving into a rather thought-provoking and somewhat controversial topic: the 5 countries where Americans might not feel particularly welcome in 2024. 1. North Korea. Let's start with the obvious one, North Korea. While this may come as no surprise to most, the situation here is a bit more complicated. North Korea is one of the most isolated countries in the world, with strict government controls on citizens and foreign nationals alike. Tensions between the U.S. and North Korea have been ongoing for decades, and political relations continue to remain strained. In fact, the U.S. government strongly advises against traveling to North Korea. While some adventurous travelers may find ways to visit, it's crucial to remember that even being caught in the wrong place or saying the wrong thing can lead to severe consequences. In recent years, there have been cases of Americans detained in the country for allegedly violating laws or participating in activities deemed offensive to the North Korean regime. In 2024, despite a somewhat more stable relationship than in previous years, North Korea remains a country where Americans face major risks, both legally and personally. It's always best to stay away unless you're going with a guided tour approved by the North Korean government, but even then, extreme caution is necessary. 2. Iran. Next, we have Iran, a country with a long and complicated relationship with the United States. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution and the subsequent hostage crisis, relations between the two countries have been severely strained. Over the years, the political atmosphere has remained tense, with a strong anti-American sentiment present among certain factions within Iran's government. Americans who visit Iran might find themselves under increased scrutiny by local authorities, especially given the current geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. There's also the issue of Iran's strict laws regarding dress codes, behavior, and what you can or cannot say. U.S. citizens visiting without an official invitation could be flagged as potential threats. Though tourism is technically allowed, the reality is that many Americans face unnecessary hassles or even detention when traveling here. 3. Venezuela. Venezuela, once a popular tourist destination in South America, has unfortunately found itself in a difficult political and economic position in recent years. The economic crisis, political instability, and deteriorating conditions have caused a breakdown in U.S.-Venezuelan relations. The government of President Nicolás Maduro has openly criticized the U.S., accusing it of interference in the country's internal affairs. For Americans traveling to Venezuela, the current environment could be quite hazardous. There are widespread reports of theft, violence, and shortages of essential goods. On top of that, the U.S. government has imposed sanctions on Venezuela, and many Americans are often viewed with suspicion in the country. Americans who do visit may face harassment or even detainment by the local authorities. In 2024, due to ongoing economic collapse and government hostility toward the U.S., it's highly advised that American citizens reconsider any travel plans to Venezuela unless absolutely necessary. 4. Cuba. Now let's talk about Cuba, which has historically been one of the most politically charged destinations for Americans. Relations between the U.S. and Cuba have fluctuated over the decades, but in recent years, political tensions have once again become a significant issue, especially with the shift in U.S. administration. Under former President Obama, there was a brief thaw in relations, and Americans were able to travel more freely to Cuba. However, under the Trump administration, many of the travel regulations were reimposed, and even though some of those have been loosened under the Biden administration, the relationship is still far from warm. Cubans have had a complicated relationship with Americans, partly due to the long-standing economic embargo, but also because of frustrations over U.S. policies that directly affect the country's future. Travelers should be prepared for some forms of hostility or bureaucratic hurdles, especially when interacting with locals who may view the U.S. as responsible for much of Cuba's struggles. It's also worth noting that while Americans are still technically allowed to visit, restrictions can make travel more challenging than in the past. 5. Russia. Lastly, we arrive at Russia. The relationship between the U.S. and Russia has been rocky for years, but recent events such as the ongoing conflict in Ukraine have further strained the two nations' ties. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, relations with the West, including the US, have deteriorated even further. In 2024, traveling to Russia as an American is far from straightforward. Tensions between the US and Russia have escalated, and the Russian government has expelled American diplomats and imposed various sanctions. Americans traveling to Russia are often viewed with suspicion, and they could face government surveillance or harassment. Additionally, the Russian government has been known to detain individuals for various reasons, including political reasons, and it's always advisable to stay informed about the current political climate before visiting. Given the current political tensions, American citizens would likely face a colder reception in Russia, making it a destination where you should exercise extreme caution. To wrap up, there are still many places in the world where Americans are not exactly welcomed with open arms, primarily due to political tensions, historical conflicts, and differing cultural views. While you can certainly travel to these countries, it's crucial to understand the risks and exercise a great deal of caution. Travel advisories are an essential resource, and they can help you make an informed decision about whether or not a certain destination is right for you in 2024.